Good morning. As you've probably deduced from the title, we are sewing the clay shirt today. We are doing a free pattern because I am a cheap beach, and while I do need more shirts for summer because I love wearing them as a throw over because, you know, sun protection, I don't want to spend money on the pattern. So I will link the free pattern on their website in the doodly-doo below, and we're going to enjoy this lovely cozy lighting we have thanks to Melbourne weather, because even though we are heading into summer, you'd never be able to guess it. My main points of making this particular shirt is I haven't actually sewn a dolman sleeve shirt before, so I thought the pattern is kind of interesting. Let's give it a go. I'm also curious to see how it fits, given that I am currently in the plus size category. So, you know, like, they may look like they'd be okay, but whether or not they actually fit the way you want them to at the end is always a mystery. So we're going to find that out together. If you are new here, hi, welcome, or welcome back if you're not new. My name is Alyssa. I sew things for the dopamine. I am a complete chaos goblin. I like to document my process. And if you like having a little bit of background noise for your own activities, or like to feel like you've got a cozy little creative buddy hanging out with you, this is a good place for you. We are going to get started today. Obviously, I already cut my pieces out last night based on this tiny little scrap that I have left of my 2 meters of fabric. Just a plain cotton linen blend in a bright purple color. We will see if I regret my color choice later on. Based on what I've seen from this pattern, it doesn't look like it's going to be too hard to construct. It looks fairly simple. I've made shirts before, so hopefully it's a smooth process, but that's usually when things go wrong. We're going to dive into this. I'm going to insert some clips of my pattern all cut out while I make a coffee, and I'll meet you back here to start sewing. Okay, so I have all of my pattern pieces cut out and laid out here. I did have to do some piecing in order to cut the front parts of the shirt out. My fabric width was just a little bit too short for that actual pattern piece. So I found a scrap that worked, sewed it to both sides of my remaining fabric, pressed my seam, completely forgot to actually finish the edge of said piecing, but you know, it is what it is, and hopefully it doesn't fray too much. And then I was able to cut out my pattern. So that was definitely a new thing for me. I haven't actually done piecing before, so it was pretty cool. The seam is almost invisible. You cannot tell where I pieced that. The next thing I did was finish off all the edges of my pockets, just so that was done. Kind of grateful that while I was contemplating not doing the French seams for this pattern, it is actually meant to be French seamed because I am almost out of overlocker thread on one of my cones and I don't have any more, so I'm gonna have to order that. And I did order that pretty much that day, so we have new overlocker thread coming. I cannot wait. So the process of doing these pockets, I have left it in here even though I didn't end up putting them on the shirt. When I got to the end, tried it on, I honestly did not think that they would be very flattering with the way I was intending to wear this shirt. So I did make the pockets, but I did leave them off. Essentially, I prepped them by folding over the top edge and sewing just where the fold is, 3/8 of an inch, so that it would be all neatly finished and I could easily press it into place to be sewn onto the shirt. And then I sewed the flaps along 3 sides so that they could be attached and then covered with the raw edges as well. The next step was doing the placket. Now, it's meant to be pressed under 3/8 of an inch and then an inch. However, in Australia, I don't have a ruler that is set to inches. So I pressed it under 1 centimetre and then about 2.5 centimetres all the way down before top stitching it in place. You are meant to leave a gap at the top of both plackets, one on each side, so that you can finish off that top edge neatly later on. So I think I left about 2.5 inches. Honestly, I'd probably recommend leaving at least 3. I had just enough to manage to finish it off properly, but it was a bit of a squeeze. I got all of my prep work done, and then I did take a break to eat something and let my camera battery charge. It dies really, really quickly, and I should probably order another one, but that's a problem for another day. Basically, I'm just doing my French seams, the shoulder seam and the side seams. There's only really 2 main seams for this garment, so once they're done, we're on the home stretch. I'm pinning them wrong sides together to begin with, and then obviously you trim down, flip it, and then sew it right sides together so that you get a nice enclosed finished seam. And it will almost be done. So let's see if I can get this done before my oldest child gets home from school. I have 2 hours.
And here we are pinning away, making sure that we've got our wrong sides together. With the French seaming, you want the wrong sides together first, and then you do the right sides. So I'm sewing that together along both top shoulder seams and both side seams. Once I have those seams sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I will then trim them down to about 1/8 inch very carefully. We do not want to get too close to our stitch line, but we also don't want to leave too much fabric that it will poke through when we do the next step. So once that's all trimmed, we pin it with right sides together this time, and that will ensure that it looks really neat from the front and really neat from the inside as well. And we sew that again with a 1/4 inch of a seam allowance, and that gives the full 1/2 inch seam allowance that is included in the pattern. Finishing up that placket, basically what you want to do with the top where you've left it unstitched is flip it wrong way out so that the right sides are touching each other, and then sew the very top line at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. When you then flip it back so that it's all fully enclosed and poke out the corner, it gives you a really nice, neatly finished top edge to that placket. Doing that on both sides finishes that up, and you just top stitch down to meet your original stitching line. And then we're pinning the collar together right sides. Once it's fully pinned up, you can sew at 3/8 of a seam allowance around the 3 edges, leaving the bottom of the collar open to be attached to the shirt. You also want to make sure to mark your dots so that you're sewing from dot to dot. I did not do this, but I was willing to take that gamble in favor of laziness. So we just stitch that at the recommended seam allowance until it's all crisp. Once it's all sewn up, we can trim our edges, so just the corners, and then poke it through, making sure you're using either a crochet hook or something else, knitting needle, anything you have available that's dull enough to poke out those corners without actually cutting through your fabric. And while it should go without saying, if you are a beginner, it is super, super important to iron everything. At each step, you want to iron your seams, collars, everything. Ironing is one of the most important steps. So after I did set ironing, I pinned my collar to my shirt on one side. So basically I did it was right side to right side. So the collar, one side of the collar to the right side of the shirt. And again, you're stitching that at a 3/8 seam allowance. I did have to clip in a little bit to my notch marking where the plackets were, so that they actually went down to the 3/8 mark. It made it so much easier to actually attach the shirt neatly and get a really nice finish on it. After I attached it on one side, I did iron the other side's seam allowance up and just pin it in place. It is going to get hand stitched down rather than machine stitched, so I just left that. I did stab myself on those pins a number of times, so that was fun.
We have made substantial progress, but I'm definitely not going to finish it before my oldest gets home from school. However, the only couple of things I have left to do is to hem the sleeves and the shirt, buttons and buttonholes, and then just hand stitch the collar down, but that will be an evening job while I'm watching TV tonight. Really quick and easy shirt. I'm going to do my finishing touches, and then once I've done all of those, I will meet you guys back here. We can talk through it all and I will give you my thoughts.
The next thing I did was hem the bottom of the shirt. I turned it up. It didn't actually give me a seam allowance for the hems of this, so I just kind of winged it. I think I ended up doing like 1.5 inches for both the bottom of the shirt and the arm sleeves. My shirt somehow ended up a little bit lopsided, and one side was actually longer than the other, but it's fine. I'm not judging too much. And then once my hems were done, it was buttonholes, which were super easy, even if the first one I did have to be unpicked. And then it was pretty much done. Like, this whole shirt was really, really quick. I think I spent maximum 3 hours on it. And we will check it out here.
I do have some thoughts. I don't particularly like it. In my personal opinion, it doesn't plus size that well. That being said, I am basing that off my personal preference with clothing, which does have a little bit of a bias to it because I am a very short human being, which means that vertically I'm quite small. So something this boxy makes me look like I have absolutely no shape at all. I'm basically a brick all the way down. So I would never actually wear this the way it's intended to be worn. However, tying it at the waist so that I have a little bit of definition in my waist, it still gives me plenty of room at the top because those dolman sleeves are very roomy. It's not bad. I think I will wear it through summer. The color, I mean, I'm not mad at it. It's quite nice. Like, it doesn't color my skin tone in any weird ways. I think it's flattering, so maybe I need to add more purple into my wardrobe. Looks wise, not the way they'd style it, but I definitely like it with the tied waist. And the instructions were pretty basic, so I didn't find it hard to follow what I was supposed to be doing. Everything was neatly finished, which was lovely. I do love a good neatly finished garment on the inside. Things that I didn't necessarily follow exactly as the pattern, I only interfaced one side of the collar. I didn't interface any of the plackets at all. I did that because I didn't want them to be super stiff. I actually prefer when my shirt collars are a little bit more flexible and drapey. So I knew going into that I wasn't going to be interfacing the plackets or the collar the way that they wanted it to. I also used a contrasting thread because I did not have this shade of purple thread, and I was not going to spotlight for one spool of thread when that would have involved loading 2 kids into the car. Did not sound like a fun time, so we went with pink. So there is a lovely little contrasting detail to this. Can't complain, easy sew. Had a pretty good time creating it, and I think that's basically it. So thanks for hanging out with me this week, guys, and I will see you next Friday with another video. Goodbye.